Hello everybody, this is Dan Miller from Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, and today we're going to do part 2 of our Dobro Backup series. And today we're going to talk about rolls. Last time we talked about sort of your chunk rhythm, which was your, this kind of thing, or that kind of thing. And we talked about some different ideas that you could do in that chunk rhythm to get different grooves. If you try to mix that stuff together, you can go over the examples I gave last time and try to mix that in with what you're doing and see which fits where. And now we're going to talk about rolls. The difficult part about this is that there's lots and lots of roll patterns that you could use. And in this week's lesson, I gave a PDF handout that had just a lot of different roll patterns. Not only your typical forward roll across all the strings, backward roll, alternating roll, and sort of the Travis style roll, which would be this kind of thing on various strings where you're not rolling forward or backward, or instead of successive strings, consecutive strings, you're alternating strings in some way. That's sort of like Merle Travis did on the guitar, where you're alternating. That's another thing to do. And in the handout, I just gave you lots of variations of all of those things, so that you could different timings. You could add different accents. You could add different articulations to all of those things. And in the course of rolling as a backup accompaniment to whether it's a singer or an instrumentalist, you're going to really combine those things and choose what you do when, based on the feel and the groove and the emotion of the song. And that's kind of vague, but what I recommend you do is you really practice all those roll patterns. You can practice them over any barred chord, and you get a feel for combining them together. And then once you get into playing a song with a group, you can start to get a feel for what timing of those things fits where. It's not just a consecutive 8-note roll all the time. A lot of times you're putting some quarter notes in there, half notes, Go through the examples that I gave. Some of them are syncopated things. You're going to mix and match all that stuff. And there's no real way I can say, well, do this on this song or whatever, because it's going to depend on the groove and the tempo and the people you're playing with and what the story of the song's about. So I'm just going to show you a few things today. Go through all those roll patterns and just get your right hand used to all kinds of different roll patterns and what they sound like. I think is the best thing. Now, the roll patterns I gave on the handout are all just open string patterns. You can do those on any barred chord and move from one chord to the next and keep those patterns going, combining those things. And you can add those things with your slides, like this. If you're doing a open G pattern, forward roll, add. Change your pattern up, add a slide in now and then, slide to the next chord. That's one of the ways the dobro can help the listener's ear anticipate a chord change, is when you slide into that next chord, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. That's one way to do it when you're playing the dobro. The two instruments in the band that can roll are the dobro and the banjo. And so you want to make sure that if the banjo is rolling a certain way, you don't interfere with him. Maybe if he's rolling, you do your chunk rhythm, or you lay out and just put some fills in there now and again. You don't want to get in the way of that roll, because you both have a similar tonality in your instrument, especially on the first through the fourth string. And you both don't want to cover each other up that way. I interviewed Bryant a few months ago, and Don played banjo with Mac Wiseman back in the early to mid 1950s, And I remember him telling me that Mac Wiseman hired Josh Graves to play dobro in the band. And this was before Josh went to play with Flatt and Scruggs. And Don, when Mac told him he was going to hire a dobro player, Don was a little bit hesitant about it. He didn't like it because he felt like the two instruments would get in the way of each other. And so he said Josh was very cordial about it, and they sat down and they worked out ways that they could coexist in the same band on the same song. So sometimes you'll need to do that, especially with the banjo player, because your rhythmic content behind the singer or the other instrumentalist can be very similar to what the banjo player might add, and so you guys just don't want to get in each other's way, okay? So one of the things, I'm not going to go through all these rolls I have on the handout because I got dozens and dozens of them. Have a good time just going through those as a workout with for your right hand. And one thing I want to say is, for the first few, I do like a 3-note roll, forward roll across these strings, each set of 3 strings. And you could skip strings with that roll. I mean, there's so many variations you can practice. And you could practice a dynamics thing where the first time through you accent the first note of the roll. Maybe another time the third. This is something else you want to practice and get into. I didn't indicate that on those roll sheets, but that's something else that you can check out is not only the variation of the pattern, but what you can vary within each pattern. The one thing I do want to talk about as far as those roll patterns go is the toggle. I have a variety of different toggles in there. I just want to explain that what that is. If you do a 3-note roll, or if you slide it, a 3-note roll in 4/4 time doesn't come out to be even until after several measures, right? So if you are just playing 2 measures and you roll that 3-note roll consecutively, when it comes time to change the chord, you're not going to finish that roll, and it's going to be kind of awkward. And that's why we do the toggle, so that you can end a measure evenly. So it's an 8-note roll, 8-note, 8th note roll. If I do a 3-note roll, it doesn't come even until that many times. So the 3-note roll with the toggle goes, if I'm counting the first 3 strings, I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1. That's one way to do it. You could go 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. There's lots of ways to do it. You could start with a toggle. You could go 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. All of that is an 8th note pattern in 4/4 time, which comes out even. Okay? So if I was going to do something like this, I might go. See, I'm coming out even at each measure. Right? And so that gives me an opportunity, if I'm rolling like that, to do something, change to the next chord, and even up at the end of the measure. And I gave lots of different examples of where you could place that toggle. You could place it at the beginning, you could place it in the middle, you could place it at the end. You could do it on any of those 3 strings that you're rolling across, whether you're rolling across the first 3 strings or doing, like I did that time, I did, it's 4, 2, 1, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 1, okay? So that's something that's good to practice. And you can do it with a backward roll, you could do it with an alternating roll, you could do it with a forward roll. Just practice all those different variations in there. And that'll get your right hand really consistent with changing from one measure to the other. Okay. Now the other thing is, that's kind of a great open G roll. You could go slide to the B note here and do a roll on the first 3 strings, slide to the G note here and do this roll I'm doing on 4, 4, 3, 1. To me, that the 3, 4, 2, 1 doesn't sound quite as good. Maybe before when I was counting 4, 2, 1, I was going 4, 3, 1. Sorry about that. Okay, so with the G chord, since all the notes are open G, if I'm sliding here, I'm sliding to a G. I've got G, B, and D all the way across, which is the 3 notes of the chord. If I wanted to do open chord roll with a C chord, I'm not going to be able to hit all those notes just because of the way that the fretboard is laid out, and I got basically 1 finger to play. What I'll do is maybe go to this note, this C note here, and then I got a G note here, which is in the chord. And I'll hit that open D note. Now that's not a C chord, that's a C add 9 chord, if you want to be have a name for it. But that sounds okay, you know, it gives that sort of open ringing sound. It also, because you have the G, which is the 5th, and the C, which is the 1st, and you have the D, which is the 2nd, that's like a suspended 2nd sound as well. It's technically, to be an add 9, you'd also have to have that 3rd in there, which would be the E note. So what we really have here, because we don't have the 3rd and we have that open D note, it's kind of like a suspended chord sound. And that usually sounds pretty good. A lot of times, you guys probably know, people will slide up here to this C position, and when you get to that C position, you can leave that D string open. Now that would be a C add 9, because now you have the C, G, and E notes in there, and then you have the D. So, but you know, a lot of people will play that in certain songs the way you do Pick Away. You go to that C chord in the lead, and you leave that D open. So anyway, some people do that in backup as well. Now when I go to the D chord, I'll just play this A note on the G string, and then I'll play the D note next to it and the D note here. That's a good roll to get into your D, and that's really like a D dyad, because you don't have that F sharp, which is the 3rd. You've got an A note and 2 D notes. When you're doing this one, when you're not playing the B note, that's a G dyad. What that gives you, because the 3rd defines between major and minor, if you're just playing the 1 and the 5 of any chord instead of the 3rd, it's more modal, because it's not defining major or minor when you're just playing that, what they call a dyad, the 2 notes, which is the 1st and the 5th. And so that works really cool over some of those kind of those old mournful mountain minor ballads. That kind of thing is kind of cool. Okay, so we're D open. This is what I'm going to do is usually roll on that. Okay. Now, one thing you can do to move from one chord to the next and help the listener's ear know that there's a chord change coming, one thing we can do, like we said before, is slide into that chord, whether it's a full bar slide or just one note of the chord that you're sliding into. That helps. But also you could do a little walk up. So if I'm going to G and I want to go to C, I could go. So I'm going G, A, B to that C, right? It could be something like. Right? So that's one way you could do it. Going from G to C. To go from C to D, you could just go C, B, A. Like that, any kind of those ways like that. Now going from D back to G, you could do a couple things. You could do something like this. Or you could do this. I like this one. So the first one is going B back to A. This next one is going from F to E. So if you're going a G-C-D progression, you could do something like this. So that's something you could do with your rolls, open rolls. And there's various things you could mix and match and change about that, but that's just kind of an example. And again, depending on the song, depending on the singer, depending on the rest of the band, I'm going to mix and match different roll patterns and different connecting licks depending on the feel and the groove of the song. But that's an example of something you might do. Now the other thing, you know, of course you could do is do any of your rolls combined with slides going into your full chords. You could do something. You know, again, that time I was doing a lot of the high notes. You could, you know, you could change the notes, change the strings, change the rolls. Just get in the feel of what's going on in the song and change your roll patterns based on what you're feeling. Not only your patterns, but the notes you emphasize. And you can add double stops and slides in there. You can add pinches. You can, you know, just any variety of stuff. Add quarter notes, add half notes, add slides, add full 3-note pinches, add double stops, add any of that stuff just based on what you are hearing in the song and what you're hearing as far as fitting into the groove, okay? So go ahead and play around with that stuff. Play around with your open chord rolls and changing from one chord to the next. Play around with these positions I talked about with just playing the C note here for the C chord, just playing the A note here for the D chord, playing either the G note in here or the B note in here for the G chord. Mess around with that stuff. See how you can change your roll pattern. See how you can change your connecting little walk-ups and phrases, and just have fun with it. Okay, next time we're going to talk about some fill licks that you can fill in when the singer is taking a vocal pause. That's the next category of things that we could do as a dobro backup. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Have fun going through those pages and pages of roll patterns, and we'll see you next time. This is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited Magazine. Thanks.